Good morning, everyone. I am Shubham, and I'm here to introduce you to Lookup. We are trying to enable pedestrian safety services using shoe-mounted sensors. Every day, we witness people walking in the streets, talking, texting, barely paying attention to their surroundings. Clearly, technology distractions are having a negative impact on pedestrian safety. They account for 15% of all traffic fatalities in the United States. In the last decade, more than 47,000 people died while walking on the streets. So much so that municipalities have started painting look signs at crosswalks in an attempt to alert pedestrians who text when crossing the street. There are awareness signs at intersections and also references to talking buses that announce over loudspeaker whenever they turn. Among existing technology-based solutions, the first here on the left is WalkSafe, which uses a pedestrian's smartphone's rear camera to detect oncoming vehicles when someone is talking and crossing the street. The drawback here is that it does not detect when a car is coming on from the other side. The second here on the right is the way that most car manufacturers seem to be going these days, which is mounting a stereo camera inside the car. This camera looks for the presence of a pedestrian in the camera's field of view and alert the driver. The limitation of this approach is that in most cases it will not work when the pedestrian is not in direct line of sight of the camera, which is very common when somebody is trying to cross the street from in between parked cars. Most fatalities occur when a pedestrian is crossing the street, and 60% people use their phones while doing so. So here's a thought. What if the phone itself could sense when you're about to enter the street and warn you if you're distracted? We have tried to achieve this by enabling shoe-mounted sensors to sense the ground that you're walking on, to detect when you're about to enter the street, and to warn you to look up. Unlike existing shoe sensing techniques of step counting, dead reckoning, we are profiling the ground that the person is walking on, particularly detecting transitions from sidewalks to street. To this end, we sense ground features that separate street and sidewalks, which are primarily ramps and curbs. Ramps are more important for the distracted walking case. Due to the gradual transition, they tend to be far less noticeable to pedestrians who are talking or texting while walking on the street. We can see that while walking on the sidewalk, the slope doesn't change much. But on the sidewalk ramp, the slope of the ground changes sharply, and this is exactly what we're trying to use through our approach. Now you would wonder, why can't we just use GPS? Use the pedestrian's location, see where he is, and identify the location to say where he's walking. We tested this hypothesis, and the blue traces is one of the traces we collected in New York City, and it's evident that in such urban canyons, modern phone GPS receivers frequently reach errors of up to 30 to 40 meters. Since sidewalks are usually only a few meters wide, GPS accuracy is not enough for street-sidewalk distinction. Going back to shoe sensors, wearable sensors would be best positioned on the feet for sensing the ground. Shoe-mounted sensors have been proliferating in the fitness tracking world, and as I mentioned earlier, they've been used for dead reckoning, step counting, indoor localizations, and other similar applications. We exploit the inertial sensors on these units to profile the ground and to detect transitions from sidewalk to street. Our prototype here contains an accelerometer, a gyroscope, a magnetometer, and a Bluetooth to communicate with the smartphone. Our basic approach is to measure the slope of the ground when the pedestrian is walking at every step. Here's a demonstration. When someone is walking on the sidewalk, with every step we see that the slope measurements don't vary much. But when walking down the ramp, we see a sharp fall, and then when back on the street, there's an uphill. Now, I would like to take this opportunity to point out that we are not looking at the absolute slope measurements. We are looking at only the change in slope measurements in a small window, which is relative values, and hence the position or the orientation of these sensors does not affect the algorithm much. How do we create these slope profiles? To compute the inclination of the ground, we would need to know the inclination of the foot. The most straightforward way of doing this is through an accelerometer. An accelerometer can measure the force of gravity, and then when a foot tilts, using or looking at the distribution of this force on the different axes of the shoe sensor, it can calculate the tilt. For the first figure here, we can see that all the gravity is acting along the z-axis of the sensor and the x-axis sees no gravity. When the foot tilts forward just a little, there is some gravity on x now and a little less gravity on z. And this ratio helps us compute this small tilt. On the rightmost figure, when the foot tilts further, we can again use the ratio of the distribution of this gravitational force to compute the pitch angle, which is the forward inclination angle. Accelerometer readings, however, suffer from vibration errors, and alone they are not enough or sufficient to detect sidewalk ramps, which are usually in the order of 3 to 4 degrees inclination. An alternative way of measuring these pitch angles is through a gyroscope. A gyroscope directly measures angular velocity, and if we integrate the angular velocity that we get along y-axis, we can get the pitch angle. While the gyroscope allows us to precisely track small movements, this integration accumulates error over time and can add to significant drift over long intervals. To overcome the drawbacks of these individual sensors and to improve the precision and the accuracy of our pitch measurements, we use a complementary filter. A complementary filter combines the pitch measurements from accelerometer and gyroscope to give us more accurate measurement. It takes care of the drift caused by the gyroscope, and it also gets rid of the noise from the accelerometer. This filter has less lag than just a low-pass filter alone. The pitch that we obtain from the complementary filter is on the bottom left here. You can think of this trace as continuous foot inclination, but we need to know exactly when the foot is in contact with the ground to get the inclination of the ground. Using this trace, we identify different phases of a person's walking cycle. The first is pitch and the corresponding trace. Next is the swing phase till the heel strikes the ground. We are, however, interested only in the stance phase. This is when the foot is completely in contact with the ground and the inclination of the foot reflects the inclination of the ground. We take all the samples collected during this stance period and average them to find the slope of the ground. This slope of the ground are the measurements that we use, and the relative change is thereby used to detect ramps which lead to streets. Not every change in these slope measurements actually is an entrance into the street or a ramp. Hence, we look for specific patterns and we assign some confidence to each of these patterns. When someone walks down a ramp, there's a sharp decrease and we call it a fall event. Walking back on the street, it's a rise event and there's an uphill. When they both occur together, we call it a trough event. We call trough events as high confidence events because this is when the slope of the ramp and the uphill of the street, so streets are curved to let water run off, and which is also a very significant incline. We call it a high confidence event because this is the most ideal case when both the inclinations can be picked up by the sensor. But due to imperfect street sidewalk designs, there are occasions when we may either just get the downhill of the ramp or the uphill of the street, which is the fall or the rise events. We do keep these events too to improve the accuracy of our system, but we classify them as low confidence events. I'll quickly run through the detection algorithm and give you an overview. We have the pitch trace, as I showed earlier, and we use a simple thresholding mechanism to detect when a person is walking down a ramp. And we look for the pattern in a very small window to detect if it's a ramp or not a ramp. The first step is to get the pitch measurements from the sensor, and then the phone computes the slope of the ground with every step. This is done by looking for a fraction of the sampling frequency sample. So we are sampling at 50 Hertz, and we only look for a fraction of those samples in the stance phase within a degree of each other to compute the average and say that this is the slope of the ground. With the slope of the ground at every step, we compute the difference to the last step, the difference in a small window, and the variation in the same window. Then we pass it on to the ramp detection algorithm that tries to look for the uphill and downhill trends that we discussed earlier. So if these uphills or downhills of the slope exceed the threshold, it classifies it as a ramp. If there is either just the downhill or just the uphill, it still classifies it as a ramp, but it labels it as a low confidence event. We use the confidence of these events to set the guard zone. The guard zone is basically to get rid of any false positives that may occur right after a true detection. So when we're very confident that this is indeed a true detection, we set a guard zone, and the subsequent detections for a small period of time are discarded. In addition to this, we also use a turn detection algorithm, which for the interest of time I'm not discussing here, which can reset the guard zone for cases when, let's say, a pedestrian crosses the street, turns, and then crosses the street again. That's when the guard zone is reset and the events are still retained. Next, I move on to the curb detection algorithm, which is very common in scenarios when pedestrians are trying to cross a street in mid-block locations. For this, we use the force associated with each step. When a person walks on a sidewalk, the force with each step does not vary much and is kind of constant. When he steps off the curb, there's a sharp peak signifying that the person just stepped off a curb. For a system intended for pedestrian safety, we tested it in New York City, which is one of the world's busiest pedestrian intersections. The solid red path here is the shorter path that we covered 20 times, which spans 2 miles, takes about an average of 1 hour to walk through. The longer path is 4 miles, takes about 2 hours to walk through, and we covered it twice. So let us scan through some snippets because for our participants, we let them walk whatever the way they like. They were not provided any instructions whatsoever, but we did fit them with cute GoPro cameras to record how they're walking. And let's look at some of those. This is a very typical Manhattan ramp, and it's not very inclined, but the slope is still picked up by the sensors. Then it's an ordinary Manhattan curb, which is again not high, but enough for the sensor to detect. Now, these experiments were not in lab or indoor straight line walking experiments, which means that we had to deal with all the real world crowd walking around people, around objects, just like you would at Times Square in New York City, and make your way. And we deal with all this disturbance and noise in our algorithm. The last here is a demonstration of some of the things that could cause false positives on the sidewalk. So let's say if there are potholes or irregular ramps or bumps, the algorithm could think of it as a person entering the street. Our next test location was in Turin, Italy, and the shorter path here, the solid red, is about 1.6 miles long, was covered 20 times, and takes an average of 30 minutes to walk through. The longer one here was covered 10 times, 2.4 miles, and takes about an hour to walk through. In all, we had 22 participants walk across 2 cities, a total of 112.5 miles, crossing the street 1,670 times, amounting to 80 hours of walking time. Now, for safety applications, the most important metric would be the timeliness of these warnings. We graph the delay distribution of the total number of detections with respect to the actual entrance into the street. So in this graph on the x-axis, 0 marks the actual entrance into the street, and we look for all detections within a 40-step window before and after the detection. So we can see that the maximum number of detections are at the step right before the entrance, followed by the first step into the street. The light green bars in the middle is where the maximum density of detections is, and we can see that the number of detections fall off as you move away from the entrance. We use this middle window as our evaluation window. We say that since it's a system for warning distracted pedestrians, if a warning comes in a small window before they're about to enter the street, it's useful. And we call any warning that occurs in this defined ground truth window a true positive. Any warning that occurs outside this window would be a false positive, which means that it's either too early or too late to warn the pedestrian. Using this metric, we try to evaluate our system, and there's a small demonstration here. So when the pedestrian walks along the yellow path, every green dot signifies a true detection and every red dot is a false detection. We can see that most of these true detections, which is the green dots, occur very close to intersections when the pedestrian is about to enter, and the false positives, which is the red dots, were caused by disturbances or misdetections. This is the map for Turin. We plot the results as an ROC curve, and we can see that for New York City, we get about 90% true detections for less than 0.7% false positives. We run the exact same algorithm over the Turin data, and we get 90% true positives for 1.5% false positives. Among other applications that our system or the gradient profiling can be used for are driver-pedestrian awareness, where whenever the pedestrian is not in direct line of sight of the driver, he could be warned when the pedestrian enters the street. There could also be an offline analysis on crossing habits. So if you want to come at the end of the day and see how your kids were crossing the street, did they cross at a sidewalk, did they cross at crosswalks, did they just run across the street, there could be an offline analysis using these gradient profiles. Another targeted application could be made for assisting visually impaired people, because if you fit these sensors on their cane, they could probably look a little ahead on the ground to see when there's a slope or there are stairs or when they need to step off a curb. A potential application would also be sidewalk health monitoring. If we crowdsourced all of this data, then it could be used by the government to see where the sidewalks are uneven or where there may be a pothole or where repairs are needed. In conclusion, we devised a profiling technique for profiling the ground gradient. We detect transitions from sidewalk to street via ramps and curbs. However, the transition detection relies on consistent sidewalk guidelines, which means that it doesn't work too well for suburban environments where sidewalks may not always be present, but it works well for urban environments which have a very consistent sidewalk map. The other problem, the other limitation would be the power in these sensors, but we are hoping that with future careful circuit design, they could probably harvest the kinetic energy of the pedestrian's foot to maybe charge these sensors. In the future, we intend to use these gradient profiles for doing sidewalk level localization. So imagine if you had a unique gradient profile for every sidewalk, you could actually identify what sidewalk and where on the sidewalk a person is walking. Another thing that we want to look at in the future is the pedestrian-driver communication to warn oncoming vehicles whenever a pedestrian enters the street. This is important because, let's say, for a very crowded urban environment, you don't want every pedestrian to send out an information just because they're walking on the street. So the crossing detection would need to be bound to the system and communicate with oncoming cars. With that, I conclude my presentation. Thank you and be safe.